The trapdoor to the attic creaked open beneath Connor Vance's hands, releasing a wave of stale air that made him cough as golden afternoon light flooded the dark space above his cottage. He had been putting off this task for months, but winter was coming to the Montana frontier, and he needed to check the roof beams for damage before the first snow fell. What he did not expect was to hear breathing that was not his own. Connor froze on the ladder, his pulse quickening as his eyes adjusted to the dimness. There, huddled in the far corner beneath the sloped roof, was a figure wrapped in what looked like stolen horse blankets. Green skin, pointed ears. His breath caught in his throat as the figure stirred, and a pair of amber eyes snapped open to meet his gaze with pure animal terror. An orc. A young orc woman, he realized, taking in her slight frame and the delicate curve of her tusks. She could not have been more than 19 or 20 summers. Her dark hair was matted and tangled, her green skin smudged with dirt, and her clothes were little more than rags. She pressed herself against the wall as if she could disappear into the wood itself. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please don't send me away." Connor stood motionless on the ladder, his mind racing. Everyone in the territory knew about orcs. They raided settlements, burned farms, and killed anyone who crossed into their lands. The militia hunted them without mercy. Just last month, a group of soldiers had ridden through town with orc heads on pikes, a warning to any who dared venture too close to human territory. And now, one was living in his attic. "How long have you been here?" he asked, keeping his voice steady despite his hammering heart. She flinched at his words, curling tighter into herself. 2 weeks. Maybe 3. I tried to be quiet. I only took small things. Apples from your cellar, water from the pump at night. I'll leave. Just please don't tell the soldiers, please." Her voice broke on the last word, and Connor saw tears tracking through the dirt on her cheeks. His hand tightened on the ladder rung. The smart thing would be to climb down, bar the trapdoor, and ride to town for the militia. That was what any reasonable person would do. Harboring an orc was treason. They would hang him alongside her, but something in those terrified amber eyes stopped him. She looked half-starved, trembling with fear or cold or both. Her hands were wrapped in dirty bandages, and he could see the edge of a wound on her shoulder that had scabbed over badly. Whatever she was, whoever she was not attacking him. She was begging for mercy. "Are you hurt?" he heard himself ask. She stared at him, clearly not expecting that question. Yes, I fell when I was running, but it's healing. Let me see." "What? Your shoulder? Let me see it." Connor climbed the rest of the way into the attic, moving slowly so as not to spook her. She watched him like a rabbit watches a wolf, every muscle tense to flee even though there was nowhere to go. When he got close enough, she reluctantly unwrapped the bandage from her left shoulder. The wound was infected. Even in the dim light, Connor could see the angry red streaks radiating from a deep gash that looked like it had been made by a sword. She had tried to clean it with something, but without proper medicine it had festered. If left untreated much longer, it would kill her. "This needs to be cleaned and dressed properly," he said. "I have supplies downstairs, medical kit from my army days. Why would you help me?" Her voice was barely a whisper, confusion and suspicion warring in her expression. Connor sat back on his heels, asking himself the same question. Why would he help her? Because she was injured. Because she looked so young and afraid. Because somewhere deep in his conscience, he could not stomach the idea of turning a terrified girl over to men who would torture her before they killed her. "Because you asked me not to send you away," he said finally. "And because that wound will kill you if it isn't treated, come downstairs. I'll make you something to eat." She did not move. "This is a trick. You'll lock me in and fetch the soldiers." If I wanted to do that, I could bar the trapdoor right now and you'd starve up here. I'm offering you food and medicine. You can accept it or not, but I'm not going to hurt you." He started back toward the ladder, then paused. "My name is Connor. What's yours?" She was silent for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, "Greta." "All right, Greta, I'll be downstairs. The offer stands." He climbed down and left the trapdoor open, returning to the main room of his small cottage. His hands were shaking slightly as he stoked the fire in the hearth and set a pot of stew to warm. An orc. In his attic. For weeks. He should be terrified. He should be angry. Instead, all he could think about was that infected wound and the hollow look of starvation in her eyes. Connor had been a soldier once, before he took his discharge and used his savings to buy this small plot of land on the frontier. He had seen things in the war. Done things. He had killed orcs in battle, watched his friends die at their hands. But he had also seen what humans did when they captured orc prisoners, and those memories still woke him in cold sweats some nights. There was killing in battle, and then there was cruelty for cruelty's sake. The minutes stretched into an hour. Connor laid out his medical supplies on the table, boiled water, and ladled stew into 2 wooden bowls. He was beginning to think she would stay hidden in the attic, until he forced the issue when he heard the soft creak of the ladder. Greta descended slowly, wrapped in one of the horse blankets like a cloak. In the firelight, he could see her more clearly. She was shorter than he expected, maybe 5.5 feet tall with a lean, wiry build. Her green skin had a warm undertone like spring leaves. The small tusks protruding from her lower jaw gave her an exotic appearance, but her face was surprisingly delicate, with high cheekbones and a straight nose. Her dark hair, once cleaned, would probably fall past her shoulders. She stood by the ladder, poised to run. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in every detail, calculating escape routes. "Sit," Connor said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Please, the stew is hot." She moved like a wild animal approaching a trap, each step careful and measured. When she finally sat, she kept the chair angled so she could see both him and the door. Connor pushed one of the bowls toward her along with a spoon. "Eat first. Then I'll clean that wound." Greta stared at the bowl for a long moment, then picked up the spoon with trembling hands. The first bite was cautious, testing for poison perhaps. The second was ravenous. She ate like someone who had not had a proper meal in weeks, which Connor supposed was probably true. He ate his own portion more slowly, watching her without seeming to. When she finished, she set the bowl down and met his eyes. "Why are you doing this?" "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe because I'm tired of killing. Maybe because you don't look like a threat. Maybe because it's the right thing to do. Humans don't do the right thing for orcs. They hunt us. Kill us. Take our lands and burn our homes." There was no accusation in her voice, only a statement of fact. Connor could not argue with it. He had been part of that machine after all. Some humans do terrible things, but not all of us. Just like not all orcs are raiders and killers, I imagine. Her expression flickered with something, surprise maybe, before hardening again. "You know nothing about orcs. Then tell me." "Tell you what?" "Why you were running. Why you're alone. How you ended up in my attic instead of with your clan." Greta's jaw tightened, her hands clenching into fists on the table. For a moment Connor thought she would refuse to answer, would throw the information back in his face. But then her shoulders sagged, and some of the fight went out of her. "I helped a human child," she said quietly. "A little girl who wandered into our territory, lost and crying. I should have killed her or left her to die. That's what my clan expected, but I couldn't. She was so small, so frightened. I gave her water and led her back toward your settlements. Someone saw me. When I returned, the elders cast me out, said I was weak, tainted, that I had betrayed our blood. Her voice cracked on the last words. "My own brother hunted me, said he would kill me himself to restore our family's honor, so I ran. I ran for days. A patrol found me near the river. I fought. Got this." She gestured to her shoulder. "Fell in the water. The current carried me downstream. When I crawled out, I didn't know where I was. I just kept moving, found your cottage. You were gone for 2 days. I hid in the attic and told myself it would be for one night, then another. Then another." Connor absorbed this, the weight of her story settling over him. Cast out for showing mercy to a child, hunted by her own family, it was not so different from the stories he had heard from other soldiers who had defected or deserted. Different species, same cruelty. "Let me see your shoulder," he said. This time she did not resist. She let the blanket fall and turned to give him access to the wound. Up close, it looked even worse than he had thought. Connor soaked a clean cloth in the boiled water and began to gently clean away the crusted blood and pus. Greta hissed in pain but did not pull away. "This is going to hurt," he warned before applying the antiseptic salve he had kept from his military kit. She bit down on her lower lip hard enough to draw blood but made no sound. Her stoicism impressed him. He had seen grown men scream from less. As he worked, Connor found himself noticing small details. The way her pointed ears twitched at every sound. The faint scars on her arms that spoke of a hard life. The way her breathing steadied as she realized he truly meant to help her. When he finished bandaging the wound with clean linen, she finally released the breath she had been holding. "Thank you," she whispered. "You need rest. Real rest. And more food. You can stay in the attic if that's where you feel safest, but I'll bring you proper meals and fresh water. That wound needs to be cleaned and dressed every day until it heals." "Why?" the question burst from her. "Why are you doing this? What do you want from me?" Connor met her eyes, those striking amber eyes filled with confusion and desperate hope. "I don't want anything. I'm just trying to help." "No one helps for nothing." "Then consider it payment for the apples you took," he said with a slight smile, "and for not burning my house down while you were living in my attic." She blinked, clearly not expecting humor. Then, incredibly, the corner of her mouth twitched. It was not quite a smile, but it was close. "I'm not a very good burglar. I tried not to disturb anything. You did fine. I never knew you were there." The tension in the room eased slightly. Greta pulled the blanket back around her shoulders, still wary but no longer looking ready to bolt. "How long will you let me stay?" "Until you heal. Until it's safe. I don't know. We'll figure it out. If anyone finds out, they'll kill you. They'll kill both of us. Then we'll make sure no one finds out." That night, Connor lay in his bed listening to the soft sounds of movement above him. Greta was settling into the attic, probably still unable to believe he meant his word. He stared at the ceiling and wondered what he had gotten himself into. Harboring a fugitive orc was madness. If the militia found out, if anyone in town suspected, he would be arrested or worse. His neighbors already kept their distance because of his preference for solitude. One wrong word and suspicion would turn to investigation. But when he closed his eyes, all he could see was her face when she begged him not to send her away. That raw, desperate fear. The way she had flinched when he moved too quickly. She had been hurt enough. Whatever consequences came from this choice, he would face them. The next morning, Connor woke early and made breakfast, porridge with dried berries and honey. He climbed into the attic with 2 bowls to find Greta already awake, sitting cross-legged on a makeshift bed of the horse blankets. She watched him approach with that same wariness, but when he handed her the bowl, she took it without hesitation this time. They ate in silence for a few minutes before Connor spoke. "I need to go into town today for supplies. I'll be gone most of the day. Will you be all right alone?" She nodded. "I've been alone before. I'll stay quiet. There's bread and cheese in the pantry if you get hungry. Help yourself." The pump outside has fresh water. You trust me not to steal from you. You've been here for weeks and all you took were apples. I think I can trust you with some cheese." That almost smile flickered across her face again. "You're strange for a human." "I'll take that as a compliment." The ride into town was uneventful, but Connor found himself tense the entire time. Every person he passed seemed to look at him with suspicion, as if they could somehow see his secret written on his face. Of course they could not. He was just being paranoid. He bought his supplies, flour and salt and dried meat, and made polite conversation with the shopkeeper about the weather and the upcoming harvest. All perfectly normal. On his way out of town, he passed a notice board where a new poster had been nailed up. His blood ran cold as he read it. Wanted, orc fugitive, female, approximately 20 years of age, last seen near the Eastern Territories. Reward for capture or confirmed kill. Report any sightings to the militia immediately, so they were still looking for her. Connor pulled his hat lower and urged his horse into a faster walk. He needed to get home. When he arrived back at the cottage, he found Greta sitting on the floor of the main room, looking at one of his books. She looked up guiltily when he entered, as if expecting to be scolded for leaving the attic. "Can you read?" Connor asked, setting down his supplies. "A little. My mother taught me before she died. Human letters are different from ours, but some of the words I can guess." She closed the book carefully. "I'm sorry. I was bored hiding upstairs. I heard you leave and thought. It's fine. You can come down during the day when I'm here. Just stay away from the windows." He pulled the poster from his coat and showed it to her. "They're still looking for you. The militia has your description." Greta's face went pale, her hands trembling as she took the paper. "They'll never stop looking. Not until I'm dead. Then we'll make sure they don't find you." Connor took the poster back and threw it into the fire, watching the paper curl and blacken. "You're safe here." "For how long? Winter is coming. You'll need to go to town more often for supplies. Eventually someone will notice something, see something. You can't hide me forever." She was right, of course. This could not last indefinitely, but Connor was not ready to face that reality yet. "Then we'll take it one day at a time, starting with changing that bandage." Over the following days, a routine began to establish itself. Connor would wake and make breakfast for both of them. Greta would come down from the attic once she was sure he was alone, and they would eat together. He would change her bandage, checking the wound for signs of infection. Gradually, the angry redness faded and healthy tissue began to form. Her body started to recover from the weeks of starvation, the hollows in her cheeks filling in as she ate regular meals. She was still cautious around him, but the naked terror had faded from her eyes. She began to speak more, asking questions about his life, his work on the small farm, his time as a soldier. Connor found himself telling her things he had never spoken of to anyone else, about the nightmares that still woke him some nights, about the friends he had lost in the war, about his decision to leave it all behind and build something quiet and peaceful on the frontier. In turn, Greta shared pieces of her own past, about growing up in a clan that valued strength above all else, about learning to hunt and fight from her father, who had been a warrior of some renown, about her mother, who had died defending their camp from human soldiers when Greta was 12, about the endless cycle of violence and retaliation that had defined her entire life, until the moment she chose to save a human child instead of killing her. "I don't regret it," she said one evening as they sat by the fire, the October wind howling outside. "Helping that little girl, even knowing what it cost me. She deserved to live, to go home to her family. How could I kill a child and still call myself anything but a monster?" Connor looked at her across the firelight, this young orc woman who had sacrificed everything for a moment of compassion. "You're not a monster, Greta. Your people think I am. I don't. She met his eyes and something passed between them, a connection, an understanding. Connor felt his breath catch slightly, aware suddenly of how beautiful she was in the flickering light. The thought surprised him. He had never considered an orc beautiful before. But Greta was different, or maybe he was just seeing clearly for the first time. He looked away, uncomfortable with the direction of his thoughts. This was dangerous territory. She was a fugitive under his protection. Taking advantage of that vulnerability would be wrong, and yet he could not deny the pull he felt toward her, growing stronger with each day they spent together. If Greta noticed his discomfort, she did not comment on it. She simply returned her attention to the book she had been studying, sounding out words in the firelight. Connor watched her for a moment longer, then stood abruptly. I should check on the animals. Make sure the barn is secure before the storm hits. He fled into the cold evening air, breathing hard. This was becoming complicated in ways he had not anticipated. He needed to get control of his emotions before he did something stupid. But over the following weeks, maintaining that control became increasingly difficult. Greta was healing, growing stronger and more confident. She began to help around the cottage without being asked, cooking meals and mending his clothes with surprising skill. She would stand at the window sometimes, careful to stay out of sight and watch the autumn world with a longing that made Connor's heart ache. "You miss it?" he asked one day, finding her at the window watching leaves spiral down from the trees. "Your clan." "I miss what I thought it was," she said softly. "I miss believing my people were honorable, that we fought humans because we had to defend our homes, not because we hate for hate's sake." She turned to look at him. "But the truth is, we're as cruel as you are, as capable of evil. I was just too naive to see it until I was the one being cast out." "Maybe that's what makes you different," Connor said. "You can see beyond what you were taught, question what you've been told your people should be. Or maybe it just makes me weak. Like they said, mercy isn't weakness, Greta. It's the hardest kind of strength there is." She smiled at that, a real smile this time, and Connor felt warmth spread through his chest. Her smiles were rare and precious, and he found himself trying to provoke them more often. He would tell her stories about his childhood, about getting into trouble with his brothers, about the time he tried to teach a goat to pull a cart and ended up in the duck pond. She would laugh, the sound bright and unexpected, and Connor would feel like he had won some great victory. The first snow came in mid-November, a light dusting that turned the world white overnight. Greta stared at it with wonder, pressing her face close to the window glass. "We didn't get much snow in my territory," she said. "Sometimes in the mountains, but not like this. It'll get deeper. By January, it'll be up to your knees, maybe higher. How do you survive?" Preparation. Wood for the fire, preserved food, warm clothes, and patience. Winter on the frontier is hard, but it passes. She was quiet for a moment. "Will you let me stay through the winter, of course?" "Where else would you go?" "I don't know. I just thought maybe once I was healed you would expect me to leave." Connor turned to face her fully. "Greta, you can stay as long as you need to, as long as you want to. I'm not going to throw you out into the snow." Her eyes shimmered with emotion. "Why are you so kind to me? I still don't understand." He wanted to tell her it was because he cared about her, that somewhere in the past 6 weeks she had stopped being an orc and a fugitive and had become simply Greta. Someone he looked forward to seeing every morning. Someone whose happiness mattered to him more than his own safety. But the words stuck in his throat, too dangerous to speak aloud. "Because everyone deserves kindness," he said instead. "And because you're my friend." "Friend," she repeated, testing the word. "I've never had a human friend before." "I've never had an orc friend before. I guess we're both learning." As winter deepened, the world outside became a frozen landscape of snow and ice. Connor could only get to town once every few weeks, and even then only when the weather permitted. The isolation should have been oppressive, but instead he found himself happier than he had been in years. Greta's presence filled the cottage with life. They would spend evenings by the fire, reading or talking or simply sitting in comfortable silence. She learned to cook human food, laughing at her mistakes and celebrating her successes. Connor taught her to read more fluently, watching with pride as she worked her way through his small collection of books. She was smart and curious, asking endless questions about human customs and culture. In turn, she told him about orc traditions, about their songs and stories, their way of honoring the dead, their complex clan structures. Connor began to understand that orcs were not the simple savages he had been taught to believe in. They had a rich culture, deep traditions, and complex emotional lives. The war between their peoples was born of fear and misunderstanding as much as genuine grievance. If more humans and orcs could just talk to each other, Greta said one night, maybe we wouldn't need to fight at all. Maybe, Connor agreed, but fear is a powerful thing. It's easier to kill what you don't understand than to try to understand it. You weren't afraid of me. I was terrified when I first saw you, she laughed. Liar. You climbed right up into that attic, asked if I was hurt. Offered to help me. I was terrified inside, he insisted, but I couldn't let that stop me from doing what was right. Greta looked at him with something soft in her expression, something that made Connor's pulse quicken. You're a good man, Connor Vance, better than you give yourself credit for. He wanted to reach out and touch her face, to close the distance between them. The desire was so strong it frightened him. Instead, he stood abruptly and moved to add another log to the fire, needing the distance. It's late. We should get some sleep. If she noticed his sudden withdrawal, she did not comment. She simply gathered her blankets and climbed up to the attic, bidding him good night in that soft voice that haunted his dreams. Connor lay awake long into the night, fighting with himself. He was falling for her. There was no point denying it anymore. He had feelings for Greta that went far beyond friendship or sympathy. But acting on those feelings would be impossible. She was an orc. He was human. Their peoples were at war. Even if by some miracle she felt the same way, what future could they possibly have together? He would never be accepted in orc society, and she would never be safe in human towns. They would be outcasts, hunted by both sides. Better to lock these feelings away and never speak of them. Better to be her friend and protector than to burden her with emotions she could not possibly return. She had enough to worry about without adding his foolish heart to the list, but ignoring his feelings proved impossible. They grew stronger with each passing day, each shared meal, each moment of laughter. He caught himself watching her when she was absorbed in a book, admiring the way firelight played across her green skin. He noticed the graceful strength in her movements, the quick intelligence in her eyes. He memorized the sound of her laugh, the way she hummed while cooking, the small frown of concentration she wore when working through a difficult passage of text. Christmas came, and Connor surprised Greta with a gift, a new dress he had sewn himself from fabric he had been saving. It was simple, dark green wool that would keep her warm, but he had done his best to make it well-fitted and pretty. When she opened it, tears filled her eyes. "I've never had a gift before," she whispered. "Not like this. Something made just for me. Try it on," Connor urged. She disappeared into the corner to change, and when she emerged, Connor's breath caught. The dress fit perfectly, bringing out the warm tones in her skin and the gold flecks in her amber eyes. She looked beautiful. No, more than beautiful. She looked radiant. "How do I look?" she asked, shy and uncertain. "Perfect," Connor said, his voice rough. "You look perfect." She smiled and spun in a circle, the skirt flaring around her legs. For that moment she looked carefree and young, all her burdens forgotten. Connor wished he could give her that feeling always, could take away all the pain and fear she had endured. "I made you something too," Greta said, suddenly shy. She retrieved a wrapped bundle from her hiding spot and handed it to him. "It's not much. I had to use what I could find." Connor unwrapped it to find a scarf, hand-knitted from unraveled yarn she must have pulled from an old sweater. The work was painstaking and careful, every stitch even. The fact that she had made it for him, had worked on it in secret, filled him with emotion so strong it hurt. "Thank you," he managed. "I love it. Really, it's not very good. I'm not skilled at." He silenced her by wrapping the scarf around his neck. "It's perfect because you made it. Thank you, Greta." They stood there looking at each other, the air thick with unspoken words. Connor wanted so badly to close the distance between them, to tell her everything he felt. But the risk was too great. If she did not feel the same way, he would ruin everything. Their friendship, her sense of safety here, all of it. So he stepped back and turned to dish up the special meal he had prepared, letting the moment pass. But something had shifted between them. He could feel it in the way she looked at him, the way her hand lingered when she passed him something, the way she found excuses to be near him. January brought a massive blizzard that lasted 3 days. Snow piled up past the windows, trapping them inside with limited visibility and howling winds. On the second night, as they huddled close to the fire to conserve warmth, Greta finally spoke the question Connor had been dreading. "What happens when spring comes? When the snow melts and you can travel easily again?" Connor stared into the flames. "I don't know. I can't stay here forever. Eventually someone will find out, and I can't ask you to risk your life for me indefinitely." "You're not asking. I'm choosing." "Connor." Her voice was gentle but firm. "You need to think about your future, about building a real life. You can't do that with me here." "This is a real life," he said. "This, right now, I'm happier than I've been in years. Because you're hiding from the world. Eventually you'll want to be part of it again. You'll want a wife, children, a normal life. I'm an obstacle to that." The words burst out before he could stop them. "What if I don't want a normal life? What if I want this? What if I want you?" Silence crashed between them. Greta stared at him, her eyes wide with shock. Connor immediately regretted speaking, but the words were out there now, no taking them back. "You don't mean that," she whispered. "I do. I've been trying not to say it, trying not to feel it, but I can't help it, Greta. I care about you." "More than care, He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "I know it's impossible, I know there's no future for us, but that doesn't change how I feel. Connor, you can't. I'm an orc. Your people would kill you for even thinking. I don't care what my people think. You should. This is your life, your safety we're talking about." "And what about your life, your safety? You think I could just send you away and go back to normal, pretend I never met you?" He moved closer to her, searching her face. "Tell me you don't feel anything. Tell me this has all been one-sided and I'll never bring it up again. But if there's any chance you might feel the same way, stop." Her voice cracked. "Please stop. You don't know what you're asking. Then tell me. Help me understand." Greta wrapped her arms around herself, looking smaller than he had ever seen her. "Even if I did feel something for you, and I'm not saying I do, what future would we have? We could never live among humans. My own clan wants me dead. We would be alone, hunted, with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. I don't need anyone else, I just need you. That's not enough. You say that now, but what about in a year, 5 years? When you realize everything you gave up, you would grow to resent me, to hate me for ruining your life. That would never happen. You don't know that." "Yes, I do." Connor grabbed her shoulders gently, forcing her to look at him. "Greta, I've lived among people. I've had a normal life, and I was miserable. Since you've been here, I've felt more alive, more myself than I have in years. You didn't ruin anything." You saved me from a life that was slowly killing me." Tears streamed down her green cheeks. "You can't mean that. I've never meant anything more." He raised one hand to cup her face, his thumb brushing away her tears. "I love you. I know I shouldn't. I know it's complicated and dangerous and probably insane, but I love you and I need you to know that." For a long moment she just stared at him, her breathing ragged. Then slowly she leaned into his touch. "I'm afraid," she whispered. "I'm so afraid of what this means." "That's not an answer." "I know." She took a shaky breath. "I love you too. I've been trying not to, trying to convince myself it was just gratitude or loneliness. But it's not. I love you, Connor, and it terrifies me." The admission hung between them for a heartbeat. Then Connor pulled her close and kissed her. She stiffened in surprise for a moment before melting against him, her hands coming up to grip his shirt. The kiss was soft and careful, both of them afraid of breaking the fragile moment. When they finally pulled apart, Connor rested his forehead against hers. "We'll figure it out," he promised. "Whatever comes, we'll face it together." "Together," she echoed, and the words sounded like a prayer. That night, Greta did not return to the attic. She stayed by the fire with Connor, wrapped in his arms as the storm raged outside. They talked late into the night, making plans and discussing options. They could head west when spring came, toward the territories where the frontier was still wild and lawless. They could build a cabin somewhere remote, live off the land, stay away from both humans and orcs. It would be hard. Dangerous, lonely, but they would have each other. "I'll keep you safe," Connor promised as Greta drifted off to sleep against his shoulder. "No matter what it takes." The weeks that followed were among the happiest of Connor's life. He and Greta stopped hiding their feelings, stopped maintaining the careful distance that had kept them both safe from heartbreak. They would spend hours talking, planning their future, dreaming of the life they would build together. Connor taught her to dance one evening, laughing as they stumbled through the steps in his small living room. Greta taught him words in the orc language, patient with his clumsy pronunciation. But happiness on the frontier is always precarious, and their peace was shattered on a cold February morning when Connor heard horses approaching the cottage. He ran to the window and his heart sank. 6 soldiers, militia by the look of their gear. They must be making rounds, checking on isolated homesteads. Standard procedure, nothing suspicious. But if they insisted on searching the house? "Greta," he called urgently. "Soldiers, get to the attic. Stay absolutely silent." She moved quickly, years of survival instinct taking over. By the time the soldiers knocked on his door, she had vanished into the shadows above. Connor took a deep breath to steady himself and opened the door. "Morning," he greeted them with forced casualness. "What brings the militia out this far in winter?" The leader, a hard-faced man named Captain Derek, eyed him suspiciously. "Routine check. We're looking for any signs of orc activity in the area. You seen anything unusual?" "Can't say I have. Been pretty quiet out here. Mind if we look around?" Connor's blood ran cold, but he kept his expression neutral. "Course not. Though I don't know what you expect to find." The soldiers dismounted and began searching the property. Connor followed them, his heart pounding as they checked the barn, the root cellar, the shed. Every moment he expected one of them to notice something. A stray piece of Greta's clothing. Her footprints in the snow around the pump. Anything that would give her away. One soldier approached the cottage with clear intention to enter. Connor's mind raced, searching for some way to stop him without raising suspicion. But just as the man reached for the door, one of the others called out from the barn. "Captain, found tracks over here. Deer, looks like, fresh." The captain's attention shifted immediately. "Show me." The soldiers converged on the barn, examining the tracks and debating whether they were recent enough to be worth following. Connor stood to the side, barely breathing, praying they would leave without searching the cottage. After what felt like an eternity, Captain Derek turned back to him. "We're going to follow these tracks. Make sure it's just deer and not something else. You stay alert, Vance. If you see any orcs in the area, you report it immediately. Understood? Understood." The soldiers mounted up and rode off into the trees, following the deer tracks away from the cottage. Connor waited until they were completely out of sight before releasing the breath he had been holding. His hands were shaking as he went back inside. "Greta, they're gone." She climbed down from the attic, her face pale. "That was too close. They'll come back, Connor. And next time they might insist on searching inside." She was right. The incident had shaken them both, reminding them how precarious their situation was. They could not stay here forever. The longer they waited, the higher the chance of being discovered. "We leave as soon as the weather breaks," Connor decided. "March at the latest. I'll start preparing supplies, getting everything ready. We'll head west, find somewhere safe." Greta nodded, but he could see the fear in her eyes. Leaving meant venturing into the unknown, abandoning the small sanctuary they had built here. But staying meant inevitable discovery and death. Over the next few weeks, Connor quietly gathered supplies. He sold some of his tools and equipment in town, claiming he was planning to expand his farm come spring. He bought dried food, medicine, ammunition, and other essentials. He carefully packed everything in saddlebags and storage crates, preparing for a journey into the wilderness. Greta helped however she could, staying hidden but working tirelessly to prepare. She dried meat, sewed travel clothes, and studied the maps Connor had of the Western Territories. They worked with grim determination, both understanding that their lives depended on this preparation. Then, in early March, disaster struck. Connor returned from town to find hoofprints in the snow leading up to his cottage. Not just any hoofprints, but multiple sets. Someone had been here while he was gone. His heart in his throat, he burst through the door calling Greta's name. She was in the attic, but when she climbed down, her face was stricken. "Hunters, 3 of them. They said they were tracking something and asked to warm up by your fire. I stayed hidden, but I heard them talking. They found tracks outside. My tracks, from when I went to the pump last night." "They know an orc has been here," Connor cursed. "Did they say where they were going?" "Back to town. To report to the militia." They had maybe a few hours before soldiers arrived in force. Everything they had feared was coming to pass. Connor grabbed Greta's hands, forcing himself to stay calm. "We leave now. Right now. Get your things. I'll saddle the horses." They moved with desperate speed, abandoning careful planning for survival instinct. Connor loaded the pack horse with as much as it could carry while Greta gathered her few possessions. Within an hour they were riding west, leaving the cottage behind. The home Connor had built with his own hands, the peace he had found after the war, all abandoned in a desperate flight for freedom. The first day of travel was brutal. They pushed the horses hard, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and the inevitable pursuit. When night fell, they made a cold camp in a small ravine, not daring to light a fire. Greta huddled against Connor for warmth, both of them exhausted and frightened. "I'm sorry," she whispered into the darkness. "This is my fault. If I had been more careful, don't. This isn't your fault. We knew the risk." He held her tighter. "We're going to make it, Greta, I promise. But promises are easy to make and hard to keep." The next morning they woke to the sound of distant horns. The militia was tracking them, using dogs by the sound of it. Connor and Greta mounted up and rode hard, but they were burdened with supplies and the militia horses were fresh. By noon, their pursuers were visible on the horizon. A dozen riders, maybe more, pushing hard to close the distance. Connor's mind raced. They could not outrun them. The horses were already tiring. They needed to find a place to make a stand or somewhere to hide. There. Greta pointed to a rocky outcropping ahead, a natural formation that provided some cover. We can defend that position. Connor did not want to fight. He had left that life behind, but he also was not going to let them take Greta. If it came to violence, so be it. They reached the rocks and dismounted, setting up behind the largest boulders. Connor had his rifle and a pistol, plus ammunition. Greta had a knife and a bow she had crafted in secret during the winter months. Not much against a dozen soldiers, but it would have to do. The militia arrived within the hour, spreading out to surround their position. Captain Derek rode forward, the same hard-faced man who had searched Connor's property weeks ago. "Vance, we know you have the orc with you. Send her out and maybe we'll let you live. Claim she held you hostage." "We might believe that. She's under my protection," Connor shouted back. "And she's done nothing wrong. She's an orc. That's enough. Now send her out or we take both of you." Connor looked at Greta, seeing his own resolve reflected in her eyes. "Last chance," Derek called. "Send her out." "No," Connor whispered to Greta. "Not now, not ever." She smiled at him, fierce and beautiful. "Together," she said, "together." Connor raised his rifle and fired a warning shot over the soldiers' heads. "The next one won't miss. Turn around and ride away." The response was immediate. Gunfire erupted from the militia line, bullets sparking off rocks and kicking up dirt. Connor and Greta returned fire, holding their position as best they could. The soldiers had numbers and ammunition, but Connor was a trained marksman, and Greta's arrows found their marks with deadly accuracy. The standoff continued for what felt like hours. 2 soldiers went down, injured by Connor's shots. Another fell to Greta's arrows, but they could not hold forever. Their ammunition was running low, and the soldiers were finding better positions. Then, just as Connor thought they were finished, a strange sound echoed across the landscape. A horn, but not the militia's horns. This one was deeper, more guttural. An orc war horn. The soldiers heard it too, confusion rippling through their ranks. Connor risked a glance over the rocks and his heart skipped. Emerging from the tree line were orc riders, perhaps 20 strong, coming fast. The militia immediately redirected their attention to this new threat, shots ringing out in a new direction. In the chaos, Connor heard someone calling in the orc language. He could not understand the words, but Greta could. She stood up, exposing herself, and shouted back. A conversation happened in rapid orc speech, too fast for Connor to follow. "They're here for me," Greta said, her voice shaking. "Word reached my clan that I was being hunted by humans. My brother, he's leading the rescue. The same brother who tried to kill you. Yes, he says he was wrong, that the clan was wrong. They want me to come home." Connor grabbed her hand. "And do you want that, to go back?" She looked at him, tears streaming down her face. "I don't want to leave you." The battle raged around them. The orcs and militia were fully engaged now, a vicious skirmish playing out across the landscape. In the chaos, Connor realized they had a choice. Greta could go with her clan, return to her people. She would be safe there, protected. But he would lose her forever, or she could stay with him and they would both remain fugitives, hunted by everyone. "Go," Connor said, the word tearing out of him. "Go with them. You'll be safe." "I don't want safe if it means losing you. Greta, please. This is your chance to go home, to have your life back." "My life is with you." She grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. "I choose you, Connor Vance. I'll always choose you." Before he could respond, a figure appeared on horseback beside their position. A large orc male with battle scars and eyes that matched Greta's. Her brother. He spoke in the orc language, urgent and commanding. "He says we need to leave now," Greta translated. "Both of us. He's offering sanctuary. Protection. If we ride with them now, they'll take us somewhere safe. A hidden settlement where both orcs and humans who don't want war can live in peace. Connor's mind reeled. It was more than he could have hoped for, a place where they could be together without constantly running. But could they trust it? Could he trust orcs who days ago might have killed him on sight? Greta's brother spoke again, this time in rough but understandable human language. You saved my sister. Protected her when your people would have killed her. That makes you kin. Come with us, please. There is no time. A bullet struck the rock near Connor's head, making the decision for him. All right, we go with you. They mounted their horses and rode. Greta's brother and his warriors formed a protective circle around them, fighting a running battle with the militia as they withdrew into the wilderness. It was terrifying and chaotic, the world reduced to thundering hooves and gunfire and war cries in 2 languages. But they made it. The orcs knew the land better than the human soldiers, leading them through terrain that horses should not have been able to navigate. By nightfall, they had lost their pursuers, vanishing into the deep wilderness of the Western Territories. They rode for 3 more days, traveling through landscapes Connor had never seen. Ancient forests where trees grew so thick the sun barely penetrated, mountain passes that took his breath away with their beauty. And finally, hidden in a valley that seemed impossible to find unless you knew exactly where to look, they arrived at a settlement unlike anything Connor had imagined. It was a village, but not orc or human. Both. Houses built in a mixture of styles, gardens growing both species crops. And people, dozens of them, living and working together. Orc children playing with human children, mixed couples sharing meals. It was impossible. It was beautiful. Welcome to Sanctuary, Greta's brother said, speaking English carefully. Here we reject the war, we choose peace. You will be safe here, both of you. Over the following days, Connor and Greta learned the story of Sanctuary. It had been founded 5 years ago by a group of orcs and humans who were tired of the endless fighting. Deserters from both armies, refugees, and outcasts had found each other and built something new. Something that proved their peoples could coexist. It was not perfect. There were tensions, disagreements, and old prejudices died hard, but there was also hope. Real, tangible hope for a different kind of future. Greta's brother, whose name was Throck, sought Connor out on their 3rd day in Sanctuary. They stood on a hillside overlooking the valley, and the large orc spoke carefully. I owe you apology. When Greta was cast out, I led the hunt for her. I believed our elders, that she was weak, tainted, but I was wrong. She was braver than all of us, strong enough to show mercy when we showed only hate. He looked at Connor directly. You protected her when your people would have killed her. You gave up everything for her. That takes strength I do not know if I possess. You have my respect, and my thanks. Connor did not know what to say to that. He simply nodded, accepting the words. There is more, Throck continued. Greta told me of your feelings for each other. Among my people, when 2 wish to bond permanently, we have ceremony. Would you accept orc marriage? It would make you family, protected under our laws. I would accept anything that lets me stay with her. Throck smiled, his tusks prominent. Then we will arrange it, but know this, human. If you hurt my sister, if you betray her trust, I will kill you myself, protected or not. Fair enough, Connor said, but if I hurt her, I'll deserve it. The wedding was held a week later, a blend of human and orc traditions. Greta wore the green dress Connor had made for her, altered slightly by one of the village seamstresses. Connor wore his best clothes and the scarf she had knitted him. They stood before both peoples, speaking vows in both languages. I pledge my life to yours, Greta said, her voice clear and strong, in sickness and health, in plenty and want, in war and peace. You are my chosen, and I will stand with you until my last breath. I pledge my life to yours, Connor responded. through all hardships and joys, in darkness and light, in fear and courage. You are my chosen, and I will love you beyond my last breath. Throck bound their hands together with a ceremonial cord, speaking the traditional words. Then a human elder, an old woman who had lost her family to the war and found new purpose in sanctuary, blessed them in the name of human gods. It was strange and beautiful and perfect. When they kissed, both peoples cheered. Orc war cries mixed with human celebration. It was a sound Connor had never heard before, the sound of two peoples choosing unity over hatred. That night, in the small cabin the village had prepared for them, Connor and Greta lay together as husband and wife. They talked late into the night, processing everything that had happened. The terror of their flight, the battle, the impossible sanctuary they had found. "I never thought I could have this," Greta whispered, her head on Connor's chest. "A home, a husband, a future. I thought I would die alone and hunted." "I never thought I could have this either," Connor replied. "Purpose, love, a reason to hope, you gave me all of that. We gave it to each other." She was right. They had saved each other in every way that mattered. Connor kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair. For the first time in his life, he felt truly at peace. Spring came to Sanctuary, and with it new growth. Connor and Greta built their life together, working alongside both humans and orcs to strengthen the settlement. Connor's skills as a farmer and carpenter were valuable, and Greta's knowledge of the land and hunting proved essential. They were accepted, valued, loved, but the outside world was not so welcoming. Throughout that spring and into summer, they received reports of increased fighting between human and orc forces. The war was escalating, becoming more brutal. Refugees arrived at Sanctuary regularly, bringing stories of burned villages and massacres on both sides. The village held council meetings to discuss their response. Some argued for sending warriors to fight on behalf of their original peoples. Others insisted that engaging in the war would destroy everything Sanctuary stood for. The debates grew heated, threatening to fracture the fragile peace. It was Greta who finally stood before the council and spoke the words that changed everything. "We cannot stop the war," she said, her voice carrying to every person gathered. "But we can be an example. We can show both sides that another way is possible, that humans and orcs can live together, can love each other, can build instead of destroy. If even one person on either side sees what we have created here and chooses peace instead of war, we will have made a difference. Is that not worth fighting for?" Her words resonated. The council agreed to send messengers to both human and orc territories, not to fight but to share Sanctuary's message. It was dangerous work. Many messengers never returned, killed by those who saw peace as weakness. But some did return, bringing with them more refugees. More people tired of the endless war. More families seeking a better way. Sanctuary grew. Within 2 years, it had tripled in size. They built more homes, expanded their farms, and established trade with nearby settlements that were willing to look past species differences. It was still a small place, still hidden and vulnerable, but it was proof that coexistence was possible. In their 3rd year at Sanctuary, Greta became pregnant. The news filled Connor with joy and terror in equal measure. A child. Half human, half orc. What would their child face in this world? Would they be accepted in Sanctuary? And what if something went wrong with the pregnancy? Human and orc children had been born before in the settlement, but it was still rare, still risky. Greta took his hand, her smile radiant. "We will love this child more than anything in the world. That is all that matters." The pregnancy was difficult. Greta suffered from sickness and pain that had the village healers worried. But she endured with the same fierce strength she brought to everything: refusing to give in to fear. Connor stayed by her side constantly, reading to her, cooking her favorite foods and holding her when the pain was too much. Their daughter was born on a cold November morning, 3 years after Connor had first found Greta hiding in his attic. The labor was long and dangerous, and there were moments when Connor feared he would lose them both. But Greta fought with everything she had, and finally their daughter entered the world screaming with indignation. She was perfect. Her skin was a lighter green than her mother's, her ears pointed but slightly smaller. She had Connor's eyes and Greta's nose, and when she looked up at her parents, she already had an expression of fierce determination that made them both laugh through their tears. They named her Elena, a human name, and Thara, an orc name. Elena Thara Vance, a child of two worlds, watching his daughter grow over the following years was the greatest joy of Connor's life. Elena had the best of both her parents, Greta's strength and courage, Connor's compassion and steadiness. She learned both human and orc languages, both cultures' stories and traditions. She was proof of what Connor and Greta had always believed, that their peoples were not so different after all. Other mixed couples in Sanctuary had children too. Soon there was an entire generation of children who saw nothing strange about their mixed heritage. They played together without seeing species, only friends. It gave Connor hope that maybe, just maybe, the future would be better than the past. But challenges remained. Elena faced questions as she grew older, struggling with where she belonged. Some orc children teased her for being too human. Some human children whispered that she was a half-breed. Connor and Greta had to teach her early to be proud of who she was, to see her mixed heritage as strength rather than weakness. "You are the best of both worlds," Greta would tell her, holding her close. "You are proof that love is stronger than hate. Never let anyone make you feel less because of what you are." Elena took those lessons to heart. By the time she was 10, she was a natural leader among the children, standing up for those who were bullied and refusing to accept the old prejudices that some still clung to. Connor watched her with pride, seeing in his daughter the future he and Greta had dreamed of. The war continued beyond Sanctuary's borders, but its nature was changing. More refugees arrived, bringing news of peace movements in both human and orc territories. There were groups advocating for negotiation instead of endless fighting. Slowly, painfully, attitudes were beginning to shift. On the 5th anniversary of their arrival at Sanctuary, Connor stood with Greta overlooking the valley that had become their home. The settlement had grown into a small town with over 300 residents of both species. There were mixed couples everywhere now, children playing in the streets, and a sense of community that transcended species. "You ever regret it?" Connor asked. "Leaving your old life behind?" "Everything you gave up." Greta leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "Never. This life with you and Elena is more than I ever imagined possible. We built something beautiful here, something worth protecting." "We did," Connor agreed, "but you started it. The day you saved that human child, you set all of this in motion. You chose compassion when the world told you to choose hate. Everything we have now came from that choice." "No," Greta said softly. "Everything we have now came from the day you found me in your attic and chose not to send me away. You could have turned me in, should have by the laws of your people, but you saw past what I was and recognized who I was. That changed everything." Connor kissed the top of her head, remembering that frightened girl huddled in his attic, whispering, "Please don't send me away." So much had changed since then, but some things remained the same. He loved her just as fiercely now as he had that first winter, maybe more, knowing everything they had built together. "I would make the same choice 1,000 times over," he said. "You and Elena are my world, nothing else matters." As they stood together watching the sun set over Sanctuary, Alina ran up to join them, her dark hair flying behind her. She was 11 now, all energy and enthusiasm. "Mother, father, Master Throck is going to teach sword fighting tomorrow. Can I go, please?" Greta laughed. "Your Uncle Throck should know better than to teach children violence. It's not violence, it's defense. He says everyone should know how to protect themselves, and he says I have natural talent." Alina's eyes shone with excitement. Connor exchanged a glance with Greta. Their daughter was growing up in a peaceful settlement, but the world beyond was still dangerous. Maybe it was wise to teach her to defend herself. "All right," he agreed, "but you follow Master Throck's instructions exactly. No showing off. I promise." Alina hugged them both before racing off to tell her friends the good news. "She's so much like you," Connor observed. "Brave and strong and completely fearless. She's like you too, kind and patient and willing to see the best in everyone." Greta smiled. "She's the best of both of us." That night, as Connor lay in bed with Greta curled against his side, he reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From that terrifying moment in the attic to this peaceful evening in their home. Every hardship, every danger, every moment of doubt had been worth it. They had found something rare and precious, a love that transcended the boundaries others tried to impose, a family that proved blood was less important than choice, and a community that showed the world a different way was possible. Years continued to pass, and Sanctuary flourished. The peace movements in the outside world gained strength, influenced in part by stories of the settlement where humans and orcs lived together. Delegations began to visit, initially suspicious, but gradually convinced by what they saw. Throck became one of Sanctuary's primary ambassadors, traveling to orc territories to speak about the community they had built. He carried with him stories of his sister's happiness, of her mixed-blood daughter, of the life they had created. Some laughed at him, some threatened him. But others listened. On the human side, Connor became an unexpected voice for peace. His story spread. The soldier who had given up everything to protect an orc woman who had built a life with her against all odds. Human peace activists sought him out, asking him to speak at gatherings, to share his experiences. It was uncomfortable at first. Connor had never seen himself as a leader or a symbol. But with Greta's encouragement, he began to speak publicly about what they had learned. About how love had opened his eyes to the humanity in those he had been taught to hate. About how his life had become richer, fuller, and more meaningful because he had chosen compassion over fear. By the time Alina was 15, real peace negotiations had begun between human and orc leadership. The war that had raged for generations was finally, tentatively, moving toward resolution. It was a fragile process, constantly threatened by extremists on both sides who wanted the fighting to continue. But it was happening. Sanctuary was invited to send representatives to the peace talks. Connor and Greta went together, along with other mixed couples and their children. They stood before generals and clan leaders, living proof that peace was possible, that families could bridge the divide between species. The talks were long and difficult. There were setbacks and arguments and moments when everything seemed ready to collapse. But slowly, painfully, progress was made. Boundaries were drawn. Trade agreements were negotiated. Most importantly, both sides agreed to recognize the rights of mixed couples and their children. The final peace treaty was signed on a spring morning 6 years after Connor and Greta had arrived at Sanctuary. Both peoples celebrated, though the joy was tempered by grief for all that had been lost in the long years of war. It would take time to heal the wounds, to truly learn to live together. But it was a beginning. Connor stood with his arm around Greta as they watched the celebration in Sanctuary's town square. Alina was dancing with her friends, a mixture of human and orc children who had never known the war firsthand. The next generation growing up in a world their parents had fought to create. "We did it," Greta whispered. "Not just us, but all of us. We actually did it." "We proved it could be done," Connor corrected gently. "Now the real work begins, building a lasting peace. Teaching people to see past their prejudices. It'll take generations. But our daughter will grow up in a world where she doesn't have to hide what she is, where she can love whoever she chooses without fear. That's everything, Connor. That's everything we fought for." He pulled her closer, his heart full to bursting. She was right. They had not fixed everything. The world was still complicated and messy and full of people who clung to old hatreds, but they had made a difference. They had proved that love was possible across any divide. And their daughter, along with all the other children born of mixed unions, would carry that lesson forward. 20 years after Connor had found Greta hiding in his attic, Sanctuary had become a thriving town of over 1,000 residents. Alina had grown into a remarkable young woman, serving as a bridge between communities and working as a translator and mediator. She had her mother's strength and her father's compassion, and she used both to help build the peace her parents had fought for. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Connor and Greta stood in the same spot where they had been married. The entire town gathered to celebrate, a tradition that had developed over the years. Every anniversary, the community would come together to honor the couple whose love had helped inspire Sanctuary's founding. But this year was special. Alina stood before her parents with a young man at her side, a human from one of the nearby settlements. They held hands as they announced their engagement, asking for their parents' blessing. Greta wept with joy, embracing her daughter and future son-in-law. Connor found himself getting misty-eyed as well, watching his little girl all grown up and ready to start her own family. Another generation. Another bridge between peoples. "You two have shown us all what's possible," Alina said, addressing the crowd but looking at her parents. "You proved that love is stronger than hate, that courage is choosing compassion when the world tells you to choose cruelty. That family is what you make it, not what you're born into. Thank you for teaching me those lessons, for giving me a world where I can love freely and live without fear. I promise to pass those lessons on to my own children someday." The crowd cheered, and Connor felt Greta's hand slip into his. He looked down at her, this remarkable woman who had changed his life completely. Her green skin had a few more lines now, her dark hair was touched with silver, but she was still the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. 20 years, he said softly. "Feels like no time at all." "Feels like forever," she countered. "In the best way, a whole lifetime together. And many more to come." "Many more," she agreed. As the celebration continued around them, as their daughter danced with her future husband, as humans and orcs feasted and laughed together, Connor reflected on the incredible journey that had started with 5 whispered words. "Please don't send me away." He had not sent her away. Instead, he had chosen to protect her, to love her, to build a life with her. That choice had cost him his old life, had put him in danger, had forced him to become someone different than he had been. But it had also given him everything that mattered, a wife he loved beyond measure, a daughter who made him proud every single day, a community that embodied the values he believed in, and a legacy that would outlive them both, in the children of Sanctuary who grew up knowing that peace was possible. Some stories end in tragedy, love torn apart by circumstances beyond anyone's control. But this story, which began with a frightened orc woman hiding in an attic and a human man who chose compassion over fear, ended exactly as it should, in love, in peace, in a future they had built together, one choice at a time. Connor pulled Greta into his arms and kissed her, the same way he had kissed her on their wedding day. Around them, their community cheered. Their daughter smiled with tears in her eyes. And somewhere in the gathering crowd, children of every combination of human and orc heritage played together, innocent and joyful. This was what they had fought for. This moment, and millions of moments like it, proof that the world could change, that people could learn. That love, in all its forms, was stronger than the forces that tried to tear it apart. As the sun set over Sanctuary that evening, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Connor and Greta stood together surrounded by their family and community. They had started with nothing but hope and determination. They had faced hatred, danger, and seemingly impossible odds, but they had won. Not through violence or force, but through the simple act of choosing love over fear again and again, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. And that, Connor thought as he held his wife close and watched his daughter dance under the twilight sky, was the most powerful magic of all. The magic of two people who refused to let the world tell them who they could love or how they could live. Who built something beautiful from nothing but faith in each other. Their story had started in an attic with a whispered plea. It ended here in Sanctuary, surrounded by the family and community they had helped create. A home built on love. A future worth fighting for. A legacy that would endure long after they were gone. Together, they had changed the world. Not all at once, not in grand dramatic gestures, but in small daily choices to be kind, to be brave, to love across boundaries others said could not be crossed. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything,